Gentlemen, welcome to Fight Club.
91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo.
The first rule of Fight Club is,
Wow, nice.
you do not talk about Fight Club.
This is Buffalo's original alternative, WBNY.
Is that your blood? Some of it, yeah.
You're so wrong. Let me explain.
We are 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative.
Life, which you so nobly serve, comes from destruction, disorder, and chaos.
Brought to you by the student activity fee at Buffalo State College.
We served our country like those before us.
You know, it was a dangerous era. All of Vietnam was dangerous.
The carnage of war left an indelible mark on me.
We came back and built lives. As time went on, we faced new challenges and found support to handle them.
I went to the VA, talked to my doctor.
I started doing groups. I started doing one-on-one counseling.
At MakeTheConnection.net, you can hear our stories and find tools and services available to you.
Selling or buying a home is one of the largest financial transactions an individual can make, and you want a real estate agent by your side that will negotiate in your best interest and that truly cares about you. Catherine Moore is a licensed real estate salesperson with Realty USA at the South Transit office in Lockport. She is focused and ready to serve your needs and help you understand the real estate process. Whether you're buying your first home or selling your fourth, having someone on your side ensures a seamless process from beginning to end. For more information, go online to katmoore.realtyusa.com or call her cell phone at 716-213-3169. Kat Moore, making your dreams a reality.
Attention Buffalo businesses! Did you know that underwriting could get you noticed and recognized from people all throughout the local region? For only a fraction of the cost of what you would pay for commercial radio airtime, 91.3 FM WBNY has been an integral part of the Buffalo community since 1982. But did you know that we are a non-for-profit student-ran organization? And for us to maintain our daily operations, WBNY counts on the student activity fee here at Buffalo State, as well as the contributions from you, the local businesses. For more information, contact the WBNY underwriter at 716-878-3080 or by email at wbnyuwd@gmail.com. And thanks as always for listening to Buffalo's original alternative, 91.3 FM WBNY.
WBNY could play the hits. You're listening to 3301 The Razor, and here's a Linkin Park. See? That sucked, didn't it? Now here's something good on BNY.
Hey, listen, 91.3 WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State College Student Activity Fee. This is Friday. We are day 5. I know I'm going to keep saying it. I'm just going to keep saying it. Day 5 of Week of the Warriors. Today's topic is child abuse and bullying. Monday, dating violence and domestic violence. Tuesday was our troops and veterans. Wednesday, disease and cancer. Thursday, we had a glorious rehearsal all day long. Today, child abuse and bullying. Tomorrow is immigrants and refugees, and Sunday is LGBTQ. So keep tuned in all day. This is our spring break, and this is how we're spreading awareness. And today, in the studio, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Christina Love. I am what has been coined as an intactivist. That's an activist for human rights to advocate on behalf of children's rights to genital integrity. And locally, I created an organization called Genital Autonomy Western New York, so that when I'm registering for events like local expos and whatnot, that there's a name to my organization rather than Christina Love, who is she. But it's a worldwide grassroots movement. And so it's not just something going on in Buffalo or in the U.S. I mean, people are increasing their awareness around the world.
So where did this passion come from?
This passion came from reading Natural Family Living by Peggy O'Mara. There's a chapter in the book all about circumcision. I was about 19, so this is fast forwarding 16 years to today. But I read this chapter about what is so commonly done to baby boys in our culture, and I was flabbergasted because I had just taken it for granted that that's just what happens. And, it was a very mellow but truthful chapter, also short, but it just moved me so much. So the passion started burning in me. But I didn't actually know there is a real organized yet grassroots and all volunteer mostly movement until actually just 2011, and that's when I became much more involved in printing T-shirts, creating leaflets, registering for events, going to DC every year because there's an annual Intactivist event there in March, but now it's kind of moving to May. Yeah.
So, do you have children of yourself on your own?
Not yet, but I am planning on getting pregnant this year.
Can you explain a little bit about what that chapter was about that you read? Now, I know you can't obviously do word for word, but since it touched you so deeply, what was it?
Well, I think it just, I meant to review it before today, but since I'm very, very deep in this movement, I have just been reading other things. But this chapter, just basically discussed what happens to the baby, the procedure that we call circumcision. Probably addressed kind of how it might be for the baby. Of course, most of us, especially men in this culture who have been cut, don't have conscious memories of that. But, it's kind of easy. Any parent could look at their baby and kind of guess how their baby is feeling on a given day, Yeah. So it probably addressed that. And then I'm sure it talked about the sort of perhaps some of the reasons given to justify it, but also, most likely explaining how these reasons, they're just not valid. They've been debunked and they're really unnecessary. To do this to children is really unnecessary.
So then you've probably heard, because the one thing that I know that they say is that say you don't do it while they're babies, when the person grows up and they want to do it themselves, it's supposed to be way more horrifying.
Right. This is such a common reason given to justify why we should do this to babies. But the interesting thing is that about 70% of the world's men are intact. That means they have their foreskin, their whole penis, and less than 1% of them ever choose to amputate any part of their penis. And a Denmark study found that only 1 in 16,667 circumcisions are actually medically necessary. So really, that's such a small percentage of adult men who might actually end up experiencing circumcision if they were kept intact as they were born, with their foreskin, their whole penis. So that is one thing to look at, right, is that if very few adult men are choosing this for themselves, then why are we forcing it on babies? Because most of these babies would make it into adulthood with their whole penis if they were kept intact as they were born. But some other really important aspects to that question you asked is that for an adult, they can be fully informed, they can be fully medicated, they can even be under general anesthesia. They could take opiates for pain control after. They are potty trained, right? So they're in underwear. They could walk around naked, whatnot, this type of thing. However, with the baby, firstly, they can't understand what's happening to them. They can't possibly give consent. They're restrained to a board. And it's there are just so many other things. Many pain medications are contraindicated in the newborn. Certainly, they're not put under general anesthesia. That is clearly a contraindication. But even when some pain medication is used, it's never 100% effective. There are just so many things. That baby grows into a man, and there are many men who realize, especially once they learn what they lost, that they want that part of their body back, but they can't get it back other than from a very long, painstaking, well, it's not painstaking, but it's just long and grueling process of foreskin restoration. That may take a man 4 years to regain some of the functions that he lost in 10 minutes when he was a helpless baby who couldn't consent. So the thing is an adult male who was kept intact at any point can choose circumcision, but most of them don't, right? But he has that ability. That ability never goes away, right? He could easily seek out a urologist who would do it for him. But a baby who has been cut, has lost a healthy, normal, functional part of his body, forever. And if he grows into a teenager, a man, as I said, many men who are discovering what they've lost and who are angry and upset and wants that part of his body back, it's over and done with. It's a permanent
Why
thing.
would they want it back?
Oh, because foreskin is amazing. I mean, just to start out fundamentally, that all mammals have foreskin. You and I sitting here, both women, we have foreskin. It's called the clitoral hood. I mean, anybody who has a male dog, that dog has foreskin. You know, squirrels, you know, any mammals, we all have foreskin. So nature, God, whatever you believe, like, you know, it was clear on their design of mammalian genitalia. But foreskin has so many amazing functions. It has 16 plus sexual, immunological, protective functions, some of which are apocrine glands, dartos fascia, estrogen receptors, the frenulum, which is the male G-spot, Langerhans cells, which actually can attack HIV, lymphatic cells. The mobile skin gliding action is the hallmark function of an adult male foreskin that's fully retractable. It doesn't glide in infancy and childhood, but that feels good to the man and his sex partner. Penile sensitivity, blood vessels, dorsal nerves, Frenner band, and so many. Length and circumference, the color of the glands actually changes because it's like our eyeball. It's meant to be an internal organ, moist and protected, and the urethra as well. But once the foreskin has been removed, the glands is permanently exposed, so it dries out, it calluses, you know, it loses even more sensitivity. But the other thing is truly the foreskin is the most sensitive part of the penis. Like fine touch nerve ending studies have been done, and the most sensitive parts on a male's penis is the inner and outer foreskin and the area like where those two junctures come together, because it's a double layered mucous membrane fold of skin. And the glands itself, though we in this culture kind of put it up on a pedestal, that is actually the least sensitive part of the penis. And for a cut man, what ends up remaining as the most sensitive part of his penis, unfortunately, is his scar line. And, you know, that's an unfortunate truth of it, that every man who has been cut in infancy or childhood, he has a scar on his penis, and that's pretty hard to deal with.
And you mentioned that there would be a reason, a potential reason for it to be induced medically. What would those reasons be? Why would somebody need that over somebody that doesn't?
So like that 1 in 16,667 from that study, I am not even exactly sure what that one was. But in our culture, unfortunately, there are intact, you know, problems can be caused where, you know, sometimes I'll hear on threads like, oh, well, my 5-year-old had problems with his foreskin, so he had to be circumcised. So to address that, right, because there are a lot of people out there thinking that the foreskin is problematic when really it's not. It's just because of misinformation. So, for instance, the truth is that in infancy and childhood, the foreskin is fused to the glands, just like our fingernails are fused to our fingers. And in time, it gradually separates and loosens and then becomes retractable. But the boy should be the first to ever retract his foreskin. However, in the U.S., premature forcible foreskin retraction is epidemic. So this, and then parents will be informed by doctors that in order to properly clean their young son, that they need to retract his foreskin daily to clean beneath it. So this action of repeatedly retracting the foreskin before it's ready to retract can cause like real phimosis, which is like the foreskin is too tight to retract. It can cause phimosis later on in that man because scar tissue has developed, you know, or even adhesions can form. So like I say, there are a lot of people out there, some listeners who may have thought that, you know, their cousins, you know, whoever, like that their son needed a circumcision, but usually the problems aren't real. Like it's just a matter of recognizing proper intact care, which is very simple but also essential, which is merely, you know, cleaning a boy's penis just with plain water, just as you would a finger. just rinsing, or if wiping is needed from base to tip, no retraction ever. The boy is the first ever to retract his own foreskin, and then once he becomes fully retractable, which may not happen until age 10 years, or even 18 years or 25 years, all of that is normal, just like females start bleeding at different ages, then he will simply retract, rinse, and replace his foreskin. It's that simple. It's so much easier than brushing our teeth and our hands and whatnot, but it's just the misinformation around how to take care of the intact child in this epidemic of premature forcible foreskin retraction that causes problems. So anyway, you asked so when there is phimosis, tight foreskin where it won't retract, beyond the head, as it's designed to in the older male, in a man in teenager years and manhood, then certain things can be done, like steroidal cream, like manual stretching, whereas once again, unfortunately, in our society where doctors are pretty misinformed and uneducated about the functions and the value of foreskin, they would just be apt to recommend cutting as a solution, right? But these other less invasive measures exist and could easily be used and would be more common in other places, like European countries where most men remain intact.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you have an organization?
Yes.
Is it 501c3?
Not yet, no. It's just a Facebook entity. And then, like I say, for the purposes of registering for events, it's an entity in that regard, but not yet.
Do you do your own events?
Well, in a way, I could say yes, in that, for instance, there is an organization called the Bloodstained Men, and that's like a nationwide organization of, once again, grassroots activists, courageous men and women and their friends and intersex people who are willing to speak out and tend to wear like a bloodstained suit in the process with bold signs. They came to Buffalo, and so then I organized an event that was just to gather local intactivists and join up with the Bloodstained Men and have a street protest downtown Buffalo. But a lot of times it's more like participating in an event that's already happening, like for instance, like a baby expo or whatnot, and having a table there, with lots of materials, teaching materials, and that sort of thing, like a holistic health expo. I've done a few of those. A green expo. I, thought that I had a whole bunch of different things that were about green living, but this is what I focused the most on. And truly, I think it's like one of the greenest things you can do is just to keep your kid intact, perfect as he's born, as we would expect that you would do with a daughter, just to keep her intact.
What is some of the feedback that you get on this?
Oh my goodness, there is such a range of feedback. There can be hostility, there can be denial, like buckets and buckets and oceans of denial, because you figure that like no parent wants to admit they've harmed their child. No parent is intending to harm their child. No man wants to admit that his penis is damaged or has been damaged, especially without his consent. So many, it seems like a small thing, but it is so huge, just so huge. No doctor wants to admit that they've done harm, nor like the American Academy of Pediatrics or any of that, like admit to generations of men that they've been lied to, that this very integral part of their sex organ was removed, in infancy and childhood, and they can't really do anything about it. And so now they've been experiencing sex without knowing what normal sex really is. So anyway, a whole lot of denial, hostility. But the amazing thing is there are gems, in the rough. There are the parents and the people who are like, oh my God, I wish I would have known, and who then commit that, like, if they ever have more children, or if they have grandchildren, or even if no more children are coming down their line, but that they speak up and that they advocate to protect other children, or there are like Jewish folks who, like friends of mine in the recent past, who I was so nervous about their baby coming, and they kept him intact. They had I don't know if they had a Brit Shalom, but many Jewish families are having a Brit Shalom, which is a peaceful naming ceremony. But they kept him intact. So anyway, there are those very rewarding, we call them intact success, where it's just like, because of our raising awareness and our educating, like it makes a difference. And anytime I learn that a parent has kept their son intact, because once again, it's just a given that girls will remain intact in our culture. So that's why we focus on male genital mutilation. It just makes my heart swell. I'm just so happy and relieved at that. But then, of course, there's the next piece about proper intake care and protecting him from any harm that could come from, a nurse or a doctor or a caregiver who would forcibly retract him.
So then my next question is for any listeners out there, say they've done this to their first child and maybe they're pregnant with another boy, or say they don't want to do this with their second child. How do they react to the two sons might feel unequal?
Right. So there are, just to say, there are a lot of regret families in the movement, and I know of some locally, and that can be a concern, right? Like, well, what if when the boys are playing or, taking a bath together, whatever they see, and they ask and they wonder. But in truth, what I actually hear from, like, on the ground, like real experience with children, not my own, but other parents, is that usually when they explain in like a developmentally appropriate, simple way that the children understand, usually the older son who was cut feels like just compassion, I don't know how else to explain it other than that in that adult term, but like that there is just obvious human empathy in those situations where like the boys get it in an easier way than we adults kind of project onto them. That like, for instance, a parent may say like, and sometimes it could even be with an intact child and perhaps noticing that daddy's penis is different. I mean, daddy's penis is different because it's bigger, it's hairy, but nonetheless, like if he were to notice some difference, the conversation could be as simple as like, they cut off part of daddy's penis because that's what they thought was best, but we know better now, or like, Jonathan's penis looks like that because that's what we thought we had to do to him. But then once we had you, we knew that we could keep you just as you were born, or just something simple like this, But the children really just seem to get it. And there are so many child intactivists who go with their parents to DC for our annual gathering because it's, several days long. And so it's family friendly and, and they go on the march, they're on the lawn or we'll be on the mall this year or whatnot. And children who will hold signs, even those who were cut because their parents didn't know better at the time. So usually they handle it better than we think they will.
Do you ever get the so you take on this huge huge passion for you're telling intactivist?
Yeah.
Okay, as you keep saying, I'm like into activist, and I'm seeing the INT and then activist. I'm like, I don't understand. And then it's intactivist.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but as a female, do you ever get the fact that like people asking you why you have this huge passion when you're not a male?
Right, absolutely, yes, a lot. That is, another common sort of rebuttal to like either, well, the father should decide because he's got the penis, or like, what do you know, you're a woman, or whatnot. So the interesting thing is that, as I said before, we both have foreskin too, our clitoral hood, and I am very intimately aware of how I enjoy my foreskin, and I would not want to be without it. And in fact, that's probably another divine reason why I'm involved in this cause, because if I were born male, I would be missing this essential part of my genitalia, because that's just what my mom knew at the time. But back to your question. So because I have intact genitals, and then many women in our culture have intact genitals, we actually know more of what it is to have all our parts than a man who was cut, who for most of his life, he only has a conscious memory of what it's like to be missing his foreskin, So it's really hard actually for him to weigh in. It's almost like asking someone or saying that someone who's colorblind can vouch for the richness of all the colors in the rainbow. It's just like, it's just not possible. Like, he's been living without this part. So anyway, and then there's other aspects, right? Like there is in heterosexual relationships, right? You have how many men does that heterosexual male actually get to experience? Probably none, other than maybe in passing in the bathroom or the locker room or something like this, or looking online. But as a heterosexual woman, I've had an array of experience, right? And both cut and intact, and these conversations. So that's another aspect. So my own foreskin, my own sexual partner experience. And then the other aspect is that before a man knows he has a penis to protect, a woman knows she has her baby to protect. And that was spoken by Marilyn Milos, early founder in this movement. She created NOCIRC, the National Organization of Circumcision Information Resource Centers. It's a mouthful. And And, that's really the truth. Like, women are having babies and women are deciding. And unfortunately, in many situations, even where there is an intact husband, father, like, it may be the wife who is like, no, our son should be cut. I don't want him to get picked on or whatever. And personally, I think, oh my God, how does the husband feel and how is their sex life? But it's just like women are weighing in on this decision, whether they're advocating for children's rights and protecting babies or whether they're demanding that their son be cut. I've heard so much as a woman say, convince the father that they would cut their son so that the boy could eventually get oral sex. These are the type of responses that are out there because she finds, intact penises disgusting, basically.
So it makes me wonder, because I know East Niagara Hospital in Lockport, right before you have a baby, you can go, I don't think it's mandated, but you can go through a process where you like walk through and you take a tour of the hospital and they tell you like little things you need to know and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It makes me think that this kind, like what you're doing right now, talking about it, educating people, that should be a part of that kind of program.
Yeah.
Because there would be so many families out there that if they just took the chance to like listen to you, or if they had the option, maybe they didn't even know that this was a problem, like you were saying. If this was just something that was given to them when they were going through just the regular process, that this is something that they would probably take more seriously.
Exactly. And that's part of the problem too, right? Because parents, whether in like prenatal visits or hospital tours or whatnot, are often asked, so are you going to circumcise your son? Or if your child is a boy, are you going to circumcise him? That's what they're asked. That's what is called informed consent. So, of course, with this issue, to have a parent consent to cut off a healthy part of a baby, that's not actually where the consent legally lies. It lies with the person of that having that body part, right? So it lies with the baby who will grow into an adult and then could consent to such. But nonetheless, it's not at all informed consent at all. There's no mention that complications are they're common. They're a lot more common than is thought, and they can take years and years to show up. And one other aspect about the complications is that many men, by the time the complications show up, they're not talking to their mothers or even their doctors about their sexual problems. They're just suffering quietly with
What
them.
kind of complications?
So, anyway, so I can tell you, I had a section and I had cut it, but I forgot to paste it. And it's kind of like missing your foreskin. It's significant. I had it here. But so complications can be infection, hemorrhage. Babies die from this. I mean, every single death that has happened is needless and unnecessary. But, just as a side note about death, people will say, well, I never heard of that. But there have been recent articles in the news, and often, you need to consider that often there's, along with the settlement, there's a gag order, and
Yes.
Imagine a grieving parent, right? Like they want to maybe accept the money to help console their losses. But anyway, so death is a possibility. It takes very little blood for a baby to become in serious condition. But there are other things like adhesions. I mean, there is a ton of care involved with caring for a circumcised baby's penis, like applying Vaseline, pulling the remaining shaft skin back so that it doesn't just all of a sudden adhere to the glands because it wants to heal that way. But, that can cause problems later on. It could be painful erections in the adult male as he grows. There's no cut hairline. Like all the skin is necessary. But to remove a large part of it, the equivalent to 15 square inches in the adult male, which is the size of an index card, like that, you could see how it could cause painful erections, erectile dysfunction.
Wait.
Sorry.
Back up.
Sure.
What's the size of an index card?
3x5, and that is about the approximate size of the adult male foreskin. That is what either goes into the trash or is sold to pharmaceutical, cosmetic companies from our babies. But, of course, everything is small in the baby.
Yeah.
But as the baby grows
I'm just
and the
like,
penis
what?
grows, yes, it's a lot of skin because it's a double folded outer and inner. And so when that is, stretched open, or basically if it were like unfolded and laid flat, then it's about the size of 15 square inches.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Thank you. So complications, right. So, and there's the psychological aspects, as I said, the men who are upset and angry. I mean, some of them have stories that are from when they were 5. They realized there was a difference, because they saw an intact boy, or while playing, like they learned they were missing something or whatnot. So parents thinking like, oh, my baby is happy and healthy and he'll always be, are kind of you can't guarantee that, but the psychological aspects. I'm so sorry. I had great
okay.
complications, and I know them well. But meatal stenosis, that's like the narrowing of the urinary opening, and some men actually end up needing to have that surgically corrected because the urinary opening on the intact penis. Well, on the baby, you can't see it, and it's designed that way because the foreskin is fused to the glands, and so all you see is a pinhole. It's supposed to be a one-way valve for urine to exit, protect bacteria and contaminants from the glands and the urethral opening. But in the adult male, the urethral opening is actually like a large slit, quite wide. But in the circumcised male, because of that the callousing keratinization, it's called, and thickening of the skin, 11 layers of skin buildup, that hole can get smaller. There are some men who have glands injuries where the clamp that was used to crush their foreskin actually left a mark on their glands. Buried penis is a possible complication where, pretty much once the skin was removed, the baby's penis just went back into the fat pad of the pubic mound. I'm trying to think of images I've seen. There are skin tags, and as I mentioned, adhesions. Those are common. Sometimes curvature can be a complication of circumcision because, once again, no cut hairline, more skin could be removed on one side than the other. Like I said, sexual dysfunction, like erectile dysfunction or whatever. I guess the U.S. and Israel, I read, are the two largest consumers of Viagra. In the U.S. and both those countries have pretty high.
So Jerusalem?
I just said Israel.
Oh.
I don't know specifically what city, but both of these countries have large populations of adult male men. I'm sure the list could go on, and as I said, that I did have it, but now I don't. So.
I mean, that was still a whole lot of information. Yeah. Those of you that are listening right now, you have no idea the amount of energy that's coming from her right now. But you're very passionate. Yeah. You could be jumping around up and down in your seat right now. You're talking with your hands. You're oh my goodness.
I'm keeping a pretty good lid on it, I think. But seriously, just every intactivist is really just someone who learns about this cause and realizes that something has to be done, that babies can't speak up for themselves yet. They can't advocate for themselves yet. And most parents are uninformed. Most doctors are misinformed. The parents aren't getting the truth before they're asked the question. Oh, that's reminding me of the hospital thing we were talking about. But it's just all of us who are so called to do something, to even just open our mouths, even if it's just within your own circle, you can make a difference. You learn your cousin is pregnant, you might be the only one who brings some truth to them and actually ask them. We're not just assuming, we would love for this to have stopped yesterday. We have a law on the books since 1997 that protects girls less than 18 from any form of genital alteration, any kind of nick, any circumcision, any excision to any part of their genitals, regardless of ritual or custom of the parent, even of the girl herself, any of that. They are protected. And certainly someone could discuss how there still are girls who are cut in this country, and it's just on the underground and whatnot. But it's just... that matters, but those numbers are so much less than what's happening today. In this country, 3,000 children genital mutilation will be inflicted on them today in the U.S. alone. And it's what will it take us to speak out, to do something, to stop, to just say, wait a minute, it's 2016, we can do better than this. But you were just mentioning hospitals and the tour and whatnot, and if parents got this information first, and that is the thing. I carry info cards with me all the time. Today at Broadway Market, it was extremely populated. I passed a bunch of them, and of course, there's no way to guarantee. So many parents will not get the information in time, Mm-hmm. But if hospitals actually included, if doctors, nurses, and whatnot, even once again at the prenatal appointments, actually were educated for one, and then educated parents on the functions of the foreskin, that it is extremely valuable. Can we sit here and talk about the 16 functions of our eyelids? Probably not, but I'm glad I have mine, and I would never want somebody to take them from me. So it's if the parents learned of the functions and the value, and also because there's a whole lot of inexperience out there, right? Like I said, many cut men, they've never seen an intact penis, and many mothers, many women, wives, they've never been with an intact man, and so there's just this big gap in, and what is the intact penis? It's the scary
big gap
thing.
in information, education, insight.
Right. So you hear all kinds of other comments about like, oh, my son's not going to have a turtleneck, or like, this woman just wrote that I noticed yesterday, something like, been there, done that. Like, I like my meat cut. That's what she said, you know? So it's like, seriously, like, what if a man said that? How would we feel about that?
It's kind of degrading.
Yeah, I would say, right? So if hospitals, put this information out, doctors and nurses and whatnot, and if the conversation was more about the foreskin is valuable, it has many functions, and there are many more complications rather than just like, oh, it's so common, he'll be fine. Like, or even nurses, once again, I heard a nurse, she must have been a nurse because she's been at thousands of these forced genital cutting on babies. And she said, oh, they just sleep through it. They just sleep through it. But it's like, seriously, like if someone restrained my arms and legs and I was awake, fully conscious as babies are, and either a little pain medication was used or none, whichever, and then they were coming at me with objects. And also they were people I didn't know because the baby doesn't know. And I didn't even understand what was happening. Like maybe they spoke a different language and I wasn't understanding. I would be petrified and I would be scared and it would definitely hurt. I might go into shock, and that's what happens to most babies. But they're not just like sleeping through it, having good dreams. They're new to the world. They're fragile. They need to be loved and held and secure and safe. And these are such precious times where bonding is supposed to be happening, and breastfeeding if, the mother chooses to do that. And it's so important. And a baby experiencing this level of trauma and pain, it can seriously impact bonding and breastfeeding. But anyway, so many
should be a midwife.
Yes, and I am a doula, but
oh,
I just put a bumper sticker on my card that says "Babies love midwives." Peaceful, gentle, respectful birth. But so many parents would say no thanks. I don't want that for my son. It's just that in the absence of the knowledge, and then kind of going with the cultural rhetoric, then it's like the parent just says yes, do that to my son. That's what they think is best. But I'm telling you, an open mind is so precious and just so amazing. And when I encounter an open mind, I'm sure to let the person know how grateful I am because, there is so much resistance to this subject that when someone is like, oh my God, I am so glad to know, like I literally saved a local baby in January, and maybe I've saved more, but this is one who I clearly know about. And it was a grandma who had cut her one son, and her daughter was having her third son, and the two earlier were cut, right? And also there was a large age gap, like 4 or 5 years, and then 8 or 9, and like the grandma was totally moved by the information and everything I shared, and then her daughter was open as well, and so now the third child is intact, and also her son who's cut is thinking of having children soon. And so he also has had his mind open. So there are people like that who just get it once they come upon the info, or who it just clicks for them. They're like learning about female genital cutting. And then they make the connection like, wait, we're doing this here in this country. It's only we're doing it to our sons, to boys. And then there are others who will just fight tooth and nail until there's a law that protects boys.
That's really interesting. Have you considered a lot of the different kinds of people, because we've had a lot of information come through this week about different kinds of awareness. A lot of them are doing like lobbying and talking to legislators and stuff. Have you considered going that far?
Yeah, well, so the annual event in D.C. happens there in D.C. Because of that sort of idea, right? That's where our government is primarily located, the federal government, and to bring this issue not only to the public but to our legislatures and whatnot. And one year I actually did set up appointments with them, but mostly I just met with their assistants, and for them it was also kind of the huge learning curve of like, really, what do you mean? Like, so. Because this is grassroots, there is Intact America, which is a national organization located in the eastern part of New York State. And then there are other organizations who have state-by-state chapters like No Circ and Your Whole Baby and Saving Our Sons and whatnot. But like the vast majority of us are just doing this in our volunteer time. Yeah. And so I guess sometimes I feel frustrated by like really wanting us to have this massive, huge impact. Like, for instance, when I was at a client's house and noticed on the news that, like either the March of Dimes or the pro-life camp was having this massive march on DC. And I was like, that's what I want. But
I think that's something like the March of Dimes.
Right. Where there are just like so many people turn out, and I just would love that kind of like organization and unity, but it's like so much of us are just like fitting this into our lives in between child raising and, making our living and funding everything often out of pocket ourselves, because that's the way it works.
It seems like the biggest problem, and it seems like it could be almost like you have the people that are just very negative and don't want to listen, but then like the biggest problem, the big idea is just the lack of information.
Yeah, exactly. And getting it out there and how to get it out there when you also consider that like textbooks used in human sexuality classes in middle school and high school and college textbooks used to educate the medical professionals that we trust, many of them exclude the intact penis, like the line drawing is of a cut penis, or else it will briefly say like the foreskin covers the tip of the penis and is removed in circumcision. Like it doesn't at all deal with the functions of the foreskin, why it's there, why we continue to be born with it. Actually, to be born without a foreskin is a birth defect. It's a pathology, right? But yet here we are removing it from our son. So it's like how to get that information in there early enough. Yeah, exactly. But a law is what protects girls in this country, and so many of us, we would just love to see that law gender neutral, where it really represents the equality that we as Americans say is so important to us, that all children's genitals are protected, that they get to keep their intact genitals for their whole life until they may choose otherwise, to tattoo, pierce, cut parts off, but those are adult decisions to be made by the owner of the penis, of the body.
It seems kind of like common sense, like a doctor or anybody, a nurse practitioner, nobody's going to give you any kind of like medication or something without explaining to you first what you're about to take, how it's going to react, and all the adverse side effects. Like even in commercials, even though they speak really a lot faster, nobody's going to do it without telling you everything about it.
Right, but it's just
and I know that all they do in the hospital is just be like, do you want to do it? Okay, we're going to do it at this time.
Right. And here's the other thing is that even families, and I've heard of this locally, but I'm sure it happens around the country. We just happen to have pretty high cut rates here. Even families who are committed to keep their son intact, but who give birth in the hospital, may be asked like up to 5 times, like at each and every shift change. Oh, are you going to circumcise him?
Eventually, it wears down.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't wear down, but it's still like ludicrous. Like seriously, why are we not just assuming that baby is perfect? You
know what? You should make a some kind of like piece of paper that they can like you can mail out, or they can buy it for like $1 or something, and be like, this is a no circumcision zone, and then when they take that with them to the hospital.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes
it's okay.
Sometimes parents will write on the diaper, intact, do not retract, or like intact, like no circumcision, or put like a little silicone bracelet on the baby's, ankle or whatnot. And then I do among my files have a sort of not an anti-consent form, but this type of thing where it's like, clearly we are keeping our son intact. We do not want to be asked if we're going to, cut his genitals and all this stuff. But it's, it's not in common use. But I just want to say real quick, touching on what you brought up, is the profitability, once again, not wanting to admit error, because who wants to be wrong? Like our egos, want to protect us, right? Or like it's just the ego gets in the way. It's hard to admit we're wrong. And whether it's something simple like I broke your teacup, or whether it's like, like I convinced you to cut your son, and like actually now he's missing this essential part of his sexuality and his humanness. But it's because profitability, the procedure is profitable in itself. When you multiply how much it may cost, which could be $400 or whatnot, by how many are done, like 1 million every year in this country. And then when you consider the devices and the things like that used, like the circumstraint, the straps need to be replaced, like the clamps, sometimes the Gomco was sued and went out of business. Oh, I'm sorry. The Mogan clamp, which is used often in Jewish circumcisions, was sued and the company went out of business, but those clamps exist. But as for like the Gomco and the Plastabel, like those must need to be replaced sometimes. Those are more common in American hospitals. So many things, like simple things like the Vaseline, like but then beyond that, like, we have industries built on this that are just are secret almost. It's like you wouldn't know they exist. Like I said, the selling of neonatal foreskins, like, you can look up online how much it costs for a neonatal fibroblast, and they go for a lot of money.
Why would you want to buy that?
Because it's almost like stem cells, like neonatal newborn skin cells or cells. They want to grow, they want to replicate, right? So they are prime for use in growing skin grafts, in cosmetics. Like, there's some high-end anti-wrinkle cream that have these in there, these cells. I guess.
They probably don't let the family sell it, do they?
No, and whether whether it goes in the trash into the biomedical waste or whether it gets sold, it's not easy to track. Just like it's not actually easy to track how many babies
Sounds
die
like the black
or have
market.
complications. Yeah, but nonetheless, like I said, I mean, I don't know exactly, but like one cell or a few cells or a certain vial of cells, it's like it could be like $500 in itself for just some large sum. So there's the selling of those of foreskins and other things, right? Like, if that man does have a sexual dysfunction and he needs Viagra, or for all the relationships and marriages that don't work out because of sexual dysfunction, women, heterosexual women who have been with intact and cut men overwhelmingly prefer intact men. Like, the experience of being with a man with his whole penis, the way the foreskin works and whatnot, like I said, it feels good to the male and his partner. When the foreskin is gliding, it creates a natural ribbing. It helps the woman maintain her lubrication. It provides its own lubrication. But also, I'm so sorry, I lost my train of thought. But for those relationships where there are sexual, right, so women with cut men are more likely to experience painful sex, dryness, irritation, because by removing the foreskin, and as I said, the glands builds up extra layers of skin, the ridge, which is the coronal sulcus, like at the base of the sort of head of the penis, that gets thicker. Like, just the actual functioning of the penis sexually changes. So it's more likely to be like a hook and draw lubrication out. The man feels less, a whole lot less, so he's more likely to need to pound to feel anything. It totally can change the sexual dynamic there. So anyway, then you may have divorces and lawyers and, like, just so many different rippling implications, right? Like, perhaps psychologists, if the male, dear Abby just recommended that someone who wrote into her about his anger and pain with having been circumcised without his consent, that he seek out the help of doctors, right? So doctors' visits, even though they're unlikely to provide a valuable solution to him, because once again, there's just not this recognition that this is the first surgery that most males in our culture have experienced, so there are just so many implications that, come out. It's just so much beyond a 10-minute procedure that's done to the infant and then it's over and forgotten about. Like, this is something that he will live with for the rest of his life, basically live without, but nonetheless, he'll live with the consequences of it.
So if there's any listeners right now that would like to maybe volunteer with you or help out or contact you, how can they do that?
Well, I would be more than happy for anyone to email me at Genital Autonomy Western New York. Well, actually, let me just spell it GENITALAUTOMYWNY@gmail.com, or I'm on Facebook. You can look for Genital Autonomy Western New York as a page, or you can find me, Christina Love. My page is public, so it's very easy to communicate with me. And then also we do have a local group called Western New York Intactivists, and that's very supportive, because sometimes when you know about the subject and then you're passionate to do something about it and counter all the resistance and, the hostility and the denial out there, you can feel like a nut. Mm-hmm. Like I kind of did at the Broadway Market today. So it's really helpful to have that sort of community support and conversation with other people who get it, who their sons are intact, or even if they're a regret family with mixed children where, the first is cut, but they get it and you're all like on the same page, and have that support.
Wow, that was a lot of information. You speak so fast, but I can still understand it, so it was good. I wanted to thank you so much for coming in for this.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It has been such a great opportunity, and you made it so easy.
I mean, it's one-on-one. It's like you're just talking to me.
Exactly.
You're listening to WBNY 91.3 WB. Yeah, I just said that. Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State College Student Activity Fee.